Now it's time for Spot on Sports. Here's your hosts, Mike Trezza and Mike Guidone.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Spot on Sports, New York's premier sports talk show. We talk sports, all New York sports, and nothing but sports. My name is Mike Trezza, the great Michael Anthony driving the train for us again tonight. Mike Guidone possibly with us a little bit later on. He had a little bit of a snag he had to attend to, so we'll see if we can get Mike on a little bit later on. But we've got Rangers, we've got Islanders, we've got Jets and Giants. Quick look at their schedule, a lot of baseball. And right now, I want to let you folks know, probably the team that we've given the least attention to in the New York area over the last year and a half that we've been on the air is the New York Rangers. But tonight, they come front and center. And to help us break them down, joining us right now is our new Rangers reporter, Chris Caiozzo. Chris.
Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me on the show, Mike.
Hey, great to see you, man. So you must have been very, very excited with that Game 7. Rangers go into overtime. What is your thought process when the Rangers are getting ready to drop the puck for that extra session against the Penguins in the Garden on Game 7, Chris?
Well, I knew one guy had to step up. He had 2 penalties in that game, and every Ranger fan knows who that is, and that was Artemi Panarin. I thought he did a great job. You know, all series long, Mike, he had this itch in him to pass every puck. He had the angles, he had the shots, but he did not shoot the puck. And in the time of a goal needed, he shot the puck and he scored. But going through my mind is who is going to step up for this team? And it was Panarin. All series long, we saw some great plays by Chris Kreider, who had 54 goals on the season, who I think should wear the C on his chest next year. And most Rangers fans probably agree with me there. We saw 10 points in the series versus Pittsburgh from Adam Fox, who I think is our backbone on the defense. And then, like I said, Chris Kreider, 7 points. And I think for Panarin, going into that overtime period, he needed that goal. And I hopefully going into Carolina tonight, that's some momentum for him.
I wanted to take you back to the middle of that series, Chris. That Game 3 in Pittsburgh. Shesterkin's first road game in the playoffs. He was awful in that first period. What do you think the problem was? Was it all on him? Or, I mean, obviously there was a lot of spin afterwards, the coaching staff and others trying to explain it and say it was not all on him. Were the guys on D just not getting it done? Did nerves get the best of Shesterkin? What was your view coming away from that?
I want to take a step back to Game 2 after a big win at MSG. If you remember, I don't know if you watched the game, Jeff Carter laid a big hit on him. And he got hurt pretty bad, and there was a fight after the play. I think that shook him up a little bit. And, being on the road, being in your first playoff game ever, he's a very young player. Obviously, he's up for the Vezina, and he's up for the Hart. I think he needed this opening series to get things going. But, allowing 10 goals in 2 games is not great. I don't think Ranger fans were too happy, but it's why he's up for those 2 awards, Mike. He's one of the best and one of the best young goalies in the game, and I think he stepped up big in the last 3 games of that series.
One of the big acquisitions coming down the stretch of the regular season, Chris, was the young man Andrew Kopp. Can you talk about his play and what he's added to the Rangers offensively, not just down the stretch of the regular season, but also in that opening series against the Penguins?
Yeah, player Kopp, who's a player, 7 points in the first series. He has the highest plus-minus on the team, +4, Mike, tied with Trouba, another great defensive player on the team. Andrew Kopp, I believe, was our X factor that series versus Pittsburgh. I believe he's going to come up big in Carolina. Carolina's got some great players. We'll get to that. But Andrew Kopp, put him on that line with Panarin, that second line. I think they gel great. I think the chemistry for a guy who got traded at the trade deadline has been great in New York. And it kind of all stems from our great coach, Gerard Gallant, Mike.
And it's funny you mentioned Gallant because when after Panarin scored the game-winning goal in Game 7, Gallant said, "Well, we knew if anybody was going to score in overtime for us, it was Panarin." Do you feel that's something that coaches just sort of say to spin it, or is that really what you think he believed going into that OT?
I think he's one of the clutchest players on the team. He has the most between him and maybe Fox. I'm looking at the roster here. This is a very, very young team. And I agree with Gallant's statement there that if anybody was going to score, it was going to be him. Maybe it would have been Kreider in front of the net. Maybe it would have been Trouba or Fox on a slap shot. But I agree, and I thought the same thing. If it needed to be anyone, it would have been Panarin.
Obviously, we know a lot about Kreider and Zibanejad and Panarin, but are there any guys, Chris, that going into this next series that you, as somebody who follows the Rangers closely, are looking for maybe a little bit more from?
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the roster here. I was very disappointed in Patrick Nemeth, a very young player, led the team in penalty minutes. That's not great when you lead the team in something. It's a category you don't want to lead in. There's a bunch of guys, bunch of young guys. I really like what I saw from Alexei Lafreniere towards the end of the regular season. Caputo, and one of the higher Ranger picks. You got to remember, Mike, these guys are 22 years old. These are guys that probably, if they weren't playing in the NHL, would be in college. So, these are guys that I believe need to step up for this team. We call it the kid line, and we saw Philip Hedl win that game, have the go-ahead goal in Game 5. And I believe, they're young. They're kind of exceeding expectations. I don't believe that anybody's really, this team probably didn't belong where they are right now. So to answer your question, I don't think anybody needs to step up, but we could probably use a little bit more from Lafreniere and Kakko.
And let's go the other way. Are there guys that gave you a pleasant surprise in terms of their contribution, not just down the stretch, but again, in that first series against Pitt?
Yeah, I want to point out one guy, Keandre Miller, the defenseman, another young player, 24 years old. This is his third year in the league. I think he's been doing a great job.
He had that key breakaway in Game 7.
Yeah, and drew the penalty. He has a plus-minus of +2, Mike. That's second best for the Pittsburgh series. So a young star in Keandre Miller. Another guy who stepped up, Jacob Trouba, who towards the end of the year, I know me and fellow Ranger fans were kind of disappointed in. But he had a plus-minus of +4. He also had 8 penalty minutes. But you know what? He is one of those leaders on the team. Him and Fox, I know Lindgren's one of the starting defensemen, but to have Jacob Trouba on the second line of defense is great for this Rangers team.
Rangers' first team to be down 3-1 and also trailing in games 5, 6, and 7 and come back and win the series. So, we talked quite a bit about the Pittsburgh series. Now let's dig in, Chris, to the Carolina series. Carolina obviously favored in this series. What are you expecting overall from the Rangers going into this series that starts tonight at 7 p.m.?
Less than an hour till puck drop, Mike. I'm very excited. Carolina, this is a very, very good team, very well-coached team. And something you haven't announced yet, and I'll announce it now, Frederik Andersen should be playing tonight, their starting goalie. Antti Ranta played the whole series versus Boston. He was their third-string goalie. He wasn't even their second-string goalie. But Frederik Andersen is probably one of the best goalies in the NHL. They won the Metropolitan Division right in front of the Rangers. So this is becoming a rivalry. 2 years ago in the bubble, they played each other, and Carolina swept them 4-0. So that's not going to be far in the back of the Rangers' heads. But on the regular season, Mike, the Carolina Hurricanes won the season series 3-1. Alexander Georgiev, the backup goalie for the New York Rangers, won the only game. Shesterkin lost both games, and he'll be in net tonight. He lost one game 4-2, one game 4-3. A key stat that I do want to point out, Mike, Chris Kreider scored in all 4 games versus Carolina. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets off to a hot start tonight in Carolina.
Interesting about the goalies. I was under the impression earlier in the day that it was going to be Ronta, one of several, by the way, ex-Rangers on this Carolina team. Do you see that at all, Chris, as being an advantage for Carolina, having so many guys, or is it too long ago that it's not going to make a difference?
Short memory. We had a player named Tony D'Angelo, who did not, bad locker room player in New York. Some guys just can't handle the heat in New York. And as a New York fan, if you're not a good locker room guy, we don't want you. And, you got to credit D'Angelo, though. Excuse me. He found a new home in Carolina, and he's been cooking. He's been playing really well. He actually led the Hurricanes in the first round with 8 points. Him and Slavin, 8 points each. So he does it on the offensive side and the defensive side. He's great on their power play too.
Clearly, Sebastian Aho, one of their key offensive guys on the Hurricanes. What do you think the plan is, Chris, to stop him going into the series or slow him down a little bit?
Well, if he's going to be on the ice, Adam Fox is going to be on the ice with him. And that's a one-on-one matchup you want to focus on in this series. Sebastian Aho, 5 points last series versus Boston. I mean, the Boston did a good job of slowing him down, Mike. I got to give him credit. And I realistically thought Boston could win that series in 7 games.
And I also want to ask you, I want to switch gears with you a little bit and just to, I don't want to catch you off guard here, but do a couple minutes on the Yankees with you. Yankees obviously really, really rolling now, 27-9. But the thing that's really been interesting to me to watch, Chris, has been sort of the changing roles in the bullpen. The guys that were once the mainstays, Chapman, we saw him struggle again last night. Green, Loizaga's had some tough moments. Do you expect there's going to come a time when maybe those guys come to take on less key roles in favor of the young kids, the Michael Kings, the Clay Holmes, even the Clark Schmidts on this Yankee team?
Yeah, it's a great point, Mike. I watched the game last night, and, with this Yankees pitching staff, to answer your question, I think last year we got really spoiled with the bullpen. You remember when you hit that 6th inning, you knew it was lockdown between Green, Loizaga. We had Luis Cessa, who was great out of our bullpen last year. We traded him to Cincinnati. Chapman was excellent last year. But now, if you turn the page to this year, our offense is great. Our starting pitching is great, but our relievers, not so much. And Michael King, who has been our probably reliever of the year this year, I trust him closing games. And another guy who is not talked about a lot, Mike, Clay Holmes, who I think should be the Yankees' next closer. Chapman is kind of losing touch. He hit 94 on his fastball, which MLB fans know out there. Chapman used to be the hardest throwing pitcher in general, starting or reliever. I mean, I think it's time to switch some roles around. Going back to the late 90s, I know I was a kid, but Rivera started as an eighth inning guy. Maybe we'll see a switch. Boone is stuck in his ways. But I like things I saw out of Clay Holmes this year so far. I know we're only 35 games in, but, Clay Holmes, Michael King, Loizaga has not been the same pitcher. Chad Green has not been the same pitcher. I think there needs to be a changing of the guard in the bullpen. And I think the Clay Holmes that we got is a totally different Clay Holmes that Pittsburgh had last year.
Hey, one more on the Rangers before I let you go, Chris. Have the Rangers done enough already to get some stability in this, in this organization that who owns the team? Obviously, a guy who can be a little bit impulsive, a little bit impetuous. Is he going to, coming off, even if the Rangers are eliminated in this series, have they done enough to have everybody move forward with this team into next season?
I believe, it's a great question, Mike, because I think this team exceeded expectations so far, finishing second right behind Carolina. At one point, they were tied for first in the Metropolitan, which no one thought. This is a team that no one thought would even make the playoffs. I'm very happy with where they are right now, the New York Rangers. I don't think they're going to make majority of moves. There's a couple of free agents on the board right now, but I don't think they're going to be trading anyone. I think they're going to keep this young powerhouse of players, and they already have Kreider on a long-term extension. So if the C's not on his chest, Mike, it's going to be a sad off season for the Rangers. But I don't think the journey stops here. I think they can make it past Carolina.
As long as the Rangers stay in the playoffs, Chris, we're going to continue to have you on. You did a great job.
Thank you.
Welcome to the show, and I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thanks for having me on, Mike.
Thanks again. All right, folks, we're going to stay with the hockey theme because the other hockey team in town also had a very, very interesting week. And to break it down for us right now is our Islanders reporter. He joins us now, Johnny Sticks, John Santa Maria. John, how are you?
What's up, Mike? How's it going?
It's going great, man. Before we get to the Islanders, how did the event in Newark go?
It was an excellent event. They raised right around $17,000 for the event. It was a lot of former professionals. Obviously, Jake Dowell, who we had on last time, in my spot. So that was great to showcase them. Former New Jersey Devil Colin White was there as well, as was Long Island's own Rob Scuderi, also graduate of St. Anthony's High School, won a couple of Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh and with the Kings. So some notable guys, a lot of ex-minor leaguers. LIU Sharks well represented, one of the schools that I've actually done some PA announcing at. So it was nice. It was a nice event, nice way to kick the event off. And they're hoping to make it a yearly thing now next year up in Canada.
John, while you're talking about it, I'm going to have Michael put up the graphic one more time. So hopefully our listeners will continue to want to donate. There's the website address, folks, and you can go to that site and you can make a donation. Go ahead, John.
So it was definitely a cool experience. Like I told my brother, like I told his CEO, everybody. My brother works for Huntington's disease. That's how we set this whole thing up. And Mike, you'll agree with me 100% on this. The only PA announcing gig that you could call me for that I will not take a check from.
That's great. That was great. And I'm sure it was a terrific experience for you.
Absolutely. And Devil's got a pretty nice practice facility. It's right next door, right directly next to the Prudential Center. Pretty new. It's different layout. If anybody's ever been to Northwell Health at Eisenhower Park, a little bit of a different layout, a little smaller because it's one rink compared to two. But definitely there are some pros and cons. I've definitely given them some good advice to hopefully maybe even bring it out here to the island.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. In the meantime, John, I have to get to this with you because every Islander fan I know was somewhere between shocked, disappointed, angry, upset with the firing of Barry Trotz. When you got nobody follows the Islanders more closely than you do. When you got the news, what was your initial reaction?
I was shocked, especially because he had one more year on his contract. And the first thing we thought was this about money and not wanting to pay him, like what happened when he left Washington. That was clearly not the case. So then I did some thinking about this. I made a couple of text messages to some friends who root for the Devils. And even at the game on Saturday, talking to some guys who have played semi-pro or familiar with the Devils, even Colin White brought this up. This is what Lou Lamoriello does. He has made, now this is since 1987. That was his first year running the Devils. And it's 2022. We're looking at 35 years, just say. He has made 21 coaching changes in that span. And it's still amazing. The Devils won 3 cups when they did. Well, the amount of times he's gone from Jacques Lemaire to Larry Robinson, back to Jacques Lemaire, or when he fired Claude Julien a week before the season ended and he went to the bench. He went to the bench on 3 different occasions when he was running the Devils himself. Lou went to the bench himself and coached.
John, did you buy this business about we just needed a different voice, or do you feel there's more to it than that? And if so, what is there that's to it?
I don't know if it's a different voice. And when they hired Lane Lambert on Monday, yes, he is a different voice because he was the associate coach. Now he's the boss. I will take two logics to this one. One, Lane Lambert's name was being floated around for a bunch of jobs. Detroit, he played there, very close to Steve Eisenman, their general manager. His name was going to come up in Winnipeg, a couple of the rebuild jobs. I think my gut's telling me Lou Lamoriello was afraid to lose him off the staff. And they valued him for a lot of things. Now, let's flash back a little bit to when the whole thing happened after Trotz won the cup in Washington. They didn't want to pay him. Let's remind everybody of that. That's why he resigned and moved on. They did not want to pay him the money that the Islanders were willing to give him. That's the first thing. The second thing, they felt very confident, and this was notably for a little while, that Todd Reardon, who took over for him, he only lasted 2 years, by the way, was going to be a good replacement. They have not won a round in Washington since Barry Trotz left. That says a lot to me. But the way I look at it this one, Reardon had no prior working relationship with Trotz before they both got to Washington. Lane Lambert's been on a Barry Trotz staff for the last 11 years. This dates back to Nashville as well. So 4 years here with the Islanders, 4 years in Nashville. 4 years in Washington, 3 in Nashville. He's been a head coach in the minor leagues. He's paid his dues. To me, Lane Lambert's ready for this job. And maybe ultimately it was some philosophy that Lambert was thinking of a little differently, that he knows his boss wasn't going. And he said it on Monday. I watched his press conference. I listened to his press conference. It was on a phoner. They're going to keep the good of what Barry Trotz brought in, the good defense. He says that's not the way we have been playing is not going away. I think they're going to tweak things on offense, and I think that's where Lane Lambert's going to bring in some different things compared to what Trotz said. He'll keep the defense, and I think they will tweak elsewhere. And the one part of this whole thing that my gut is telling me that they both disagreed about, meaning Lou and Trotz, the future of Simeon Varlamov, because he's got a $5 million salary. I think he is going to have some tremendous trade value this offseason. Barry Trotz is very for the veterans, and I think they want to explore moving him. And I think Barry Trotz might have been against that one.
Let me give you a
Soroka
couple
could
of
be
the
number one.
theories, John. John, let me give you a couple of the theories
Okay.
that have been out there, and you tell me if you think there's anything to each one of these theories, okay? Number one, Barry, too tough on the young players. Anything to that?
I think part of that is true. We have seen a number of good coaches get fired for that recently. More on a serious note, meaning Mike Babcock. But if they were afraid Barzal was going to not resign, you have to take that chance.
You
I'm
jumped
sorry.
ahead of me, John. So the second one I heard, conflict between Barry Trotz and Barzell, the two of them not on the same page or not seeing eye to eye. Anything to that?
Possibly, maybe the offensive philosophies. And maybe that's where Lambert will come in and tweak it.
Okay. Number three, and you alluded to this, not offensive minded enough. Guys who are offense first kind of guys were frustrated or hampered by their roles within the framework of the team. Any credence in that?
I think a lot of this was offensive driven. And you know how we'll really get a better answer of that one? How Lane Lambert tweaks the coaching staff. Is he going to keep these assistants or is he bringing in all new guys?
Okay. So, Lambert, John, I mean, guys like me, I don't know much about him. So, for Islander fans, hockey fans in general, or just New York sports fans who, like me, don't know a lot about Lane Lambert, what can you tell us about him?
Well, he paid his dues. He's 57 years old. He's been on an NHL bench for 11 years. He has head coaching experience in the minor leagues. First crack at coaching in the NHL as a boss, you're going to move a seat over. And I think the most important thing was keeping some continuity there with some tweaks like what he said, like what him and what Lou said on Monday.
Okay. So, with Lane Lambert, I mean, is he going to be a guy that fans and even media guys are going to respond to?
I definitely think so. He had a big role in the coaching staff. He was associate coach, so he was like your lieutenant. So he did coach the team for about a week and a half when Barry Trotz's mom passed away in January, and then he had to go on COVID protocol. So Lambert was in charge, and Lou said he was very impressed with how he ran the team during that span. So that's what led him to part of what also led him to this decision to go with Lane Lambert to coach the team. And like I said, I think they were afraid he was going to go take a job elsewhere, and they saw his value to the staff compared to the other assistant coaches. And if they wanted to keep some continuity, they knew they had it on the bench. So,
I think, John, much like Jet fans, Islander fans have that sense of always waiting for the bottom to drop out, always waiting for something disastrous. After all of this time spent sort of rehabilitating their image in the NHL, getting a beautiful building to play in, do you feel like there are some Islander fans who now have gone back to that sort of fatalistic mentality of, oh, woe is us. I root for a franchise. And I'm sorry to tick you off by asking you this. That is a bunch of lovable losers.
no, I don't think so at all. I think the pressure now is on Lou Lamoriello that this is going to work. That he made this. But I told you I had this conversation with one of my good friends who roots for the Devils, and they questioned him all the time. I mean, every time Jacques Lemaire was let go and brought back, and every other coaching move that they made, I mean, if they still maintain the success, I mean, you may not agree with it, but if he has a quick switch. So I guess it's just it's wait and see. No, I don't think they're going to go back to the bottom. I feel like this team, and I think they know that this team could get back to the playoffs with just maybe some small tweaking. I think they saw they were exposed in some areas that maybe they could. But one thing that I really hope Lane Lambert does, if he's going to hire another associate coach, I hope it's not Jim Hiller or John Gruden, who are one of the assistants now, if they stay on board. I'd like to see somebody
I assume you don't mean that John Gruden, right?
No. And they don't even spell their first names the same. So no, they're two different people.
Yeah.
I hope personally, if they could hold John Gruden, who worked very well with the defense, keep him on board. If they decide they need a new voice to run the power play and move on from Jim Hiller, I'm okay with that. But one thing I'd like to see for Lane Lambert, maybe put somebody on the bench next to him who's been a head coach in the league before. Somebody like David Quinn, who used to coach the Rangers. Somebody who's done the job on a daily basis. Yes, he's been around Barry Trotz a long time, but maybe somebody who could just maybe coach a power play, but also be like sort of a mentor to, okay, this worked, that worked, just some new ideas and new thinking.
John, just 2 minutes left with you. And I want you to just give me, out of the really key guys, are there any guys you would like to see move on from the Islanders to someplace else? And also, if you can, give me one guy or even two guys that you have your eye on acquiring for the Islanders for next season.
Well, I think it starts with the goaltending because you have your answer with Ilya Sorokin. So if you could move Semyon Varlamov, create $5 million in salary cap space, and whether you add a top winger or you need defensemen, and you're wondering too if they're going to also possibly explore the idea when the season is over, as he hits free agency, to bring Nick Leddy back and run the power play because they really missed him this year. And if they could clear some space, I don't know if he'll get the money that his last Islanders contract was, but if they could find a way to bring him back, we saw what a difference that, because I think Chara's not going to come. I think he's going to retire. I think Andy Green at this point, it's up in the air with him if he'll play or not. So you got to wait on those decisions. They have to re-sign Scott Mayfield. That's something that's got to get done. Noah Dobson's going to be due a contract. Matt Barzell's due a contract next year. And then the other guy, it's going to be hard, and I don't know if they want to use the buyout, and I think it would be very hard as a franchise to do, and that's to move on from Josh Bailey. He still has 2 more years at $5 million apiece. That could really create a lot of salary cap space, but he's going to be hard to move. So I think with him, you just try and get the best what you could get out of him, but and that could help upgrade the forwards, but it's going to be really hard to move his contract.
Yeah, and plus, then you won't be able to sing that song anymore, John. And I know how much you enjoy that.
Hey, but you know what though? I still think number 12 will be up in the rafters, whether it's they retire his number, he'll be in the Highlanders Hall of Fame someday, regardless. But it might just be the near end, or maybe a new philosophy. They'll get a little more out of him. But those are a couple of things. I don't think this team needs major tweaking, but maybe just some different thoughts on some different areas how to play the game.
All right, John. Terrific job as always. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks. All right.
All right, Mike.
Thank you. All right, folks. So we got to hockey with Chris Caiozzo, our new Ranger guy. Got to the Trotz firing with Johnny Sticks, John Santa Maria. And it is time for some baseball. Joining me right now is our intrepid Mets reporter. He is a member of the 7-Line Army, the guy we call Cappy, Chris Caputo. Chris, how are you?
Hey, how's it going, Mike? I'm doing well.
It's great, man. How did the kid do at T-ball today?
Awesome. Just hit a walk-off homer. They all tied.
Oh man, he's a future judge. I love it.
He's more of a Rizzo. We got a lefty there.
Oh, really? Does he both hit and throw lefty, or just?
Oh yeah, and only 3 years old, so we'll see.
Wow, great stuff. Great stuff. So, Chris, you and I talked about this in the previous show, and actually, this is going back to our discussions dating back to last season and the off season about changing the culture. I don't want to overemphasize this, but how much do you think the hiring of Buck Showalter for this New York Mets team has made a difference just in terms of the seriousness, Chris, with which guys approach their jobs?
I think you're right, Mike. I think you could bring in someone just to do a lineup every day and maybe here or there make some tweaks. But I think kind of guys know where their place is with Buck. Like, for instance, I think he's only thrown a guy on back-to-back days 12 times so far this year, which means that these guys know that they're not going to be overused early. And only on occasion, even on double headers, he's trying not to throw guys back-to-back, and obviously not in both games. So I think with the pitching staff, those guys in the bullpen at least know what's going on. The second thing is the guys pretty much know beforehand when they're going to hit. He has lineups set 6-7 days in advance, knowing who's going to pitch and what they're doing against them. And unless somebody gets COVID or gets hurt, that really Dom Smith's day in the game is going to be on 4 days from now, and Pete Alonso is going to DH on Thursday. I think that culture changes things a lot as opposed to just flipping a coin. But, how much does it affect them at whatever they are, 24 and 14? It's probably 2 or 3 games difference.
I wanted to ask you about the rotation. Now, we got the news today that you were probably expecting, Chris, that DeGrom is unlikely to take the mound until July over at Citi Field. But this rotation has held up great. I mean, Max Scherzer is Max Scherzer. He's going to do what Max Scherzer does. But if I gave you Taijuan Walker, Chris Bassett, Tyler McGill, and asked you, Chris, are you waiting for the bottom to drop out for one of those guys? Is it any of those guys? And if so, which of those guys would it be?
Well, I think we've already seen that McGill's now on the DL because of some soreness, in his arm. So I think these guys just aren't ready to throw 200 innings. So at some point, there's going to have to be some relief. I think just like last year, Taijuan Walker is going to hit a wall at the All-Star break. I think Scherzer is just going to keep going. They'll try and get him that extra 6th day whenever there's a day off or something like that. I think this kid Bassett is just phenomenal. A great pickup for New York. Let me just say this, though. At some point, you're going to need DeGrom. You cannot expect to make/do anything in the playoffs if you don't have a second ace. And I think just kind of throwing out there a 5th guy here or there, they're going to be in some trouble. But Carrasco has done some really good things, and I think that's promising. But you're not going to get the Trevor Williams and the Tyler McGills to be Cy Youngs throughout the season. At some point, you need DeGrom back.
Here comes the old catch-22 into play, though, Chris. If you bring back DeGrom too early and he ends up getting hurt again and then is out down the stretch and out into the playoffs, then you're in real trouble. If you let him linger on the DL for much longer, then obviously there's a chance that even though Philly's been lousy and Atlanta's been lousy, some of these teams come back and start to sneak up on you a little bit.
I just want to know if he's healthy or not. I mean, they keep saying, oh, it's getting better. He's going to throw harder from longer distance. He's going to get on a mound. If he's healthy, he does not have a contract, extended for long term. He needs to get out there and he needs to prove himself. And if he's healthy, he should be out there. Now, can we cut his innings down to 140 if we get him out there at the All-Star break? Fine. But at some point, as sad as this may sound, the wheels are going to fall off. The Mets are going to start to collapse a little bit. Some of the things that they have faults on are going to catch up to them. And they can be hidden by another guy like DeGrom. But I think for the most part, these starters have been doing a great job. It's their bullpen that's going to eventually be the downfall.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I hinted at it, Chris, about the division. Now, we all know Washington's a terrible team, but are you surprised that either Philly or Atlanta haven't gotten out of the gate a little bit quicker this season?
Again, I think with Atlanta, it's a chemistry thing. You get rid of Freddie Freeman. You really didn't have Acuna on day one. Coming off a World Series, I think there's a little bit of a hangover. So I think there's just a little consistency. Losing Jock Peterson, they don't have the same team. Soler is gone. That's not the same team as last year. So I could see them falling off a little bit, but they're going to come back. The team I think that I think you're worried that they're 17 and 19 or whatever it is the Phillies. I mean, they should be better than what they are. Bryce Harper's getting injections to try and just let him DH, forget throwing the ball. People are trying to run Girardi out of town because of the way he manages the team. And I think that if the Phillies don't start getting it going, that they might eventually start to fall off. But I think the Braves are going to get back in it.
So let me ask you point blank right now, today, on May 17th, 18th, whatever today's date is. Are the Mets the best team in the National League?
National League East, yes, they're not the best team in the National League. The Dodgers are definitely better than them. I could even see Milwaukee top to bottom being better than them. And if you look at the NL West, I think as of the other day, every single team was 500 or better. So you got to watch out for the West. And the Mets have to go out to Colorado where, think about this, the weather on Thursday, 89 degrees. The weather on Friday, 43 degrees. And on Saturday, it's going to snow. So, when you go and play those teams in the West Coast, you got to make sure you split. And that's going to be interesting. And, this is all going to change even next year. You got to play every team next year. So you have to get teams. I know you had asked me earlier in the season. You got to get teams when they're down. And if the Phillies are down now, play them 13 out of 19 times. Get it over with, because at some point they're going to get hot. Don't play the Marlins now when they are somewhat hot, and get them in July when they traded everybody. So I think for the Mets, it's kind of like staying above that 8 to 10 game over 500 as long as you can. And then maybe you find some weak teams later. But I think they are the best team in the National League East, but maybe the third best team in the National League.
Let's shift gears right now, Chris. I know you're very anxious to talk some Yanks with me. After a 7-6 start, believe it or not, their record in the last 23 games, 20-3, firing on all cylinders right now. What's your impression of this tear the Yanks have been on?
People beat up on the Yankees for losing, I think, 2 out of 3 to the Orioles to start the season. And last year, they probably didn't host a game because they didn't win games against the Orioles. Right now, they are taking care of business. And they are hot from top to bottom. Nasty Nestor. I mean, people want to get on Cole. I think he's 3-0 with a 2.95 ERA. What else do you really want? I think top to bottom, they are phenomenal. You got 3 guys with double-digit home runs with 875 or better OPS. Right now, the $210 million for 7 years or whatever the number was that Judge turned down, it looks like he was a mastermind. And instead of $30 million, he can demand $34 million in the offseason. I think he's just on a total tear. He probably should have 15 home runs if it wasn't for the wall in Baltimore. He should have had a third one last night. But they're just top to bottom good. I thought the one guy that was going to fall off was Gleyber Torres. I think he's back for them. He's playing really well. Probably the one problem again is, you're going to ask me later, is Chapman still your closer? And he's given up a run in 4 consecutive appearances, but he's still got a pretty good ERA and he's saving games. It's just a matter of, can the manager make sure that he's in the right spot at the right time and they don't overuse him?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I brought it up. I don't know if you heard the beginning of the show. I had the other Chris, our new hockey Rangers guy on it. He's also a Yankees guy. So I asked him about the shift in bullpen roles where Chapman, Green has been spotty at times. Loizaga's had some rough outings. Meanwhile, you've got these 3 kids, Michael King, Clay Holmes, Clark Schmidt, that have all been lights out. And I mentioned this to you and Coach Mike in previous shows, Chris. I think the worm is going to start to turn a little bit, and those young guys are going to start to take on key roles a little bit more often at the expense of Chapman and maybe a couple of the other mainstays.
The other thing is it is hard to get the last 3 outs of the game. But let's say it's the 8th inning and 2, 3, 4 are up, and Michael King is in the game. He's really facing the heart of the lineup. Maybe he's facing 3, 4, 5. The guy who comes in the 9th inning might have to face 6, 7, and 8. And he did his job and everybody claps for him. But the other night, Michael King went 3 innings. That's phenomenal. So it's not always the 9th inning. And I think King has been phenomenal. He's just been doing everything for them. I think he's got 37 strikeouts in 20-something innings. He gets ground balls. He just does everything for them. And I think if your starters can give you 6, I think eventually the Yankees are going to get to be those, like the olden days where they could go, we're going to go to, Mendoza, and then we're going to bring in somebody for the 8th, and we got Rivera for the 9th. And they were lights out for 3 innings.
Yeah, what's really funny, Chris, is that there's a certain talk show host in New York who I think also works for the Yankees. I'm not quite sure. But he pressed Boone really hard, really early in the season about this whole 5 infielders into 4 spots equation. And Boone was really, really adamant as I've ever seen him, and got animated when he was insisting that not only was this not going to be a negative, but that this was actually going to be a positive. And at the time, I thought he might have just been touting the company line. But I mean, if you look at the results, Chris, it's really, really hard to argue with right now.
I agree. And, Mets, Yankees, either one of the things that they both need is depth. You don't know when a guy's going to go down. You don't know when a guy's going to go in a slump. And you don't know when all of a sudden a guy can't, Joey Gallo can't hit lefties and we got to bench him at some point. So where are we going to find this? And you need versatility. And maybe you got a guy who could play the outfield every once in a while, maybe not in the 9th inning, but give you the first 6 innings in the outfield, and he gives you a righty bat. So having that is always going to be a positive, having that extra bench guy. I think the one area also that the Yankees have missed for many, many years is a catcher, a guy that, is a legit catcher and also can hit the ball. And they really haven't had that guy who night in, night out is going to be really good with the pitching staff and is going to hit better than 250.
You're talking about a Jorge Posada, basically.
That's the last I remember. After that, you had guys kind of, hey, I could do this, but I can't do that. And if you can't catch the ball and you're hitting $1.90 and you got 22 home runs, eventually that's going to catch up to you. And in the playoffs, the coach is just going to put that guy on a bench. So I think, that's always another spot. But honestly, let's think about this. 27-9, you're at a 75% winning percentage. The last time that happened was when the Yankees won 112 games in 1998. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win 120, and I'm not saying they're going to win 112, but they're definitely on pace to win way more than 100 games with what they have. And at the All-Star break, if something is weak, they're going to try to go out there and find some holes to fill.
I brought up some clouds in the Mets silver lining, Chris, so let me do the same with the Yankees. You mentioned Gallo. He's been terrible. I can't stand him. I want him out of here. But the other guy that's really been killing us, killing us as much as you can kill a 27-9 team. But the other guy that's been hurting us in big spots is Aaron Hicks. How much longer can you continue, Chris, to run both of these guys out to the outfield every day before you, let's say, call a Miguel Andujar back up and give him a little bit of a run?
Yeah, I think you're right, but you say as much as I can kill a 27-9 team. If they're 20-17, you're probably going to pull that trigger and try and bring somebody up a little bit more. But when you can hide a guy in the lineup and still, win, I think they're going to try to get their most out of that guy and say, oh, maybe we can get his bat hot and bench him a day or two here or there. But they just have so many weapons. Imagine Donaldson starts hitting more home runs. The weapons just keep going. DJ LeMahieu is nowhere near where he was 2 years ago, but he's still a quality player, can play multiple positions. I'm sure you could sneak one of those fifth guys, if needed. One of those fifth infielders could go out and play the outfield.
I wanted to spend a couple minutes with Mike on the NBA. He got called away on an emergency. So let's dig into the conference finals, Chris. Did anything surprise you about Phoenix getting eliminated or about Milwaukee getting eliminated?
I thought the Celtics played really tough, and they just really they have some guys that can really take over a game. You got the smarts, and then you got Tatum that can dominate a game, and you just have guys that hustle and play hard.
Tatum's been incredible this postseason.
Just putting on numbers galore, taking over games. And I think that kind of outdoes it. Now, Giannis was phenomenal himself. I mean, the guy's putting up triple doubles. He just kind of got to a point where it's every night he has to be the one guy, and the other guys have to step it up. Was I surprised? Not necessarily. I thought the Nets had a chance to beat the Celtics, but I really thought the Celtics were a better team. I didn't know if they would gel together with this new coach as quickly, but I really thought that the Suns kind of fell apart. And to lose Game 7 at home by 40 points was just embarrassing. I thought they should have put on a better showing. But I would say right now, looking at those teams, yeah, people are going to say that I think the first game, the Celtics were playing without a couple of guys. They got hurt and they weren't able to play. And Jimmy Butler is a star. I mean, this guy is you're going to say Tatum's
phenomenal.
Jimmy Butler is going to do it on both ends of the courts. And I know we don't talk this way because guys are supposed to play everywhere. But we talk about a two-way player, a guy that plays both offense and defense. That's Jimmy Butler. He does it on both ends of the court, and he's going to help his team. You get Kyle Lowry healthy. You get, the big guy inside. Like, they can start dominating games at both ends of the courts, and you got a coach that's been there before. I really do like the Heat, but I really was impressed with the West Coast. I think if Doncic really wants to, he'll take over a game. He could take over a whole series, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Mavericks win the whole thing.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised. I was a little bit more surprised that Milwaukee got bounced than I was with Phoenix. I really didn't like Phoenix. I don't like their front court at all. I didn't think they belonged in the finals last year, and that didn't surprise me very much. So taking a look at the teams that are left, Chris, Boston against the Heat in the East, Dallas against Golden State in the West. Who do you like in each of those series?
I just think it's a battle of attrition in the West. I mean, the Warriors are just going to keep running until they can't. They're just going to keep shooting. They're trying to shoot the lights out. Are they the Warriors of old? I don't know. I would give them the advantage, but I just can't doubt what Dallas has done. And I really think that, Luka has just been a player that's going to take over just as much as a Curry and somebody else. If Draymond Green's not giving them minutes, I think that's a huge loss for them. So I really do like the Mavericks in 7. I think it's going to be a tough series. And as I said, I just think the Heat grind things out. They went after the 76ers in ways that I didn't think they were going to. I thought that series was probably going to lean until Embiid got hurt. I thought that that was going to lean towards the Sixers, but I think that the Heat are probably going to, just because of defense. I think they work so hard on defense. Doesn't mean the Celtics don't, and the Celtics have some good pieces. And if they start to gel, as I said, I think they'll be pretty good. But I am just so impressed with Jimmy Butler and the job that he's done. And the other thing is, in Philly, you got a lot of coaches that they're ready to run out of town, and it's starting with Girardi. It may end with Doc Rivers.
And let me stop you with Girardi for a sec. 4th highest payroll in baseball right now, Chris. And people are looking at that and saying, hey, listen, you know what? You're spending the money the Mets, the Dodgers, the Yanks are spending, and you're not even at 500. Now, I like Girardi, but in your view, do fans have a right to be on his case at this point in time?
In Philadelphia, they are crazy. They don't care. They'll run you out of town by being 15 games over 500. So do they have a right? I think Girardi coaches every game like it's the 7th game of the World Series. And that, I think, is a little too much. You can't throw Zach Wheeler out there on May 16th for 138 pitches. You just have to kind of know your guys. You can't keep throwing Bryce Harper out there when he's playing with one arm. You can't keep throwing Gene Segura out there when you're getting no hit. You got to change things up. And I think Girardi is, hey, I'm going to manage it the way I want to manage it. No one's going to tell me otherwise. But I think, do they have a right to ask for his head right now? It's 40 games into the season. You got to give him a shot to kind of bounce back. Is Aaron Nola going to be better? Is the pitching going to? They have a horrible bullpen, horrible. And I think eventually they'll be okay, but they'll probably get rid of him at the end of the year, just like they do with every manager.
But in terms of the Sixers, boy, I'll tell you, those fans have a right to be upset right now.
Yeah, I think Doc Rivers lives off of like one moment here or there. Did he really ever have something where he led somebody, or did he ride on someone's coattails one year? And the crazy thing is, there's a guy in town who just so-called retired who would love to sit on an NBA bench, and he's sitting in Philadelphia as the old coach of the Villanova Wildcats, and that's Jay Wright. And I could really see that being a little sketchy that he kind of stays in town. I think if he goes to the NBA, he'd have to go maybe to, the Charlotte Hornets or the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yeah, but Jay doesn't want any of that, Chris. He doesn't want that dysfunctional family picnic that the Sixers have become.
No, but I'll tell you what, it would definitely be a challenge for him. And I think he's looking for an NBA job.
All right, so I wanted to get to just a couple minutes with the Giants and Jets schedule, Chris. And looking at them, it's really funny. I'm surprised I'm the only one who's been complaining about this for a few years now. And they did it to the Giants again this season. And they also did it to the Jets. Listen, it's no secret. Both teams have been lousy. But whatever winnable games that they get are folded into the second half of the season. If you look at this Giants schedule this year, right? They are playing the AFC South, which means Jacksonville, which means Houston. A lot of very winnable games. But if you look at this, the game against Houston is not till week 10.
Right.
The game against Detroit is that following week.
Okay.
And even the Seahawks that now no longer have Russell Wilson, right? That game is not until week number 8, right before the bye week. So the Giants have a stretch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games that are really winnable games that they could probably, as bad as they are, win 5 or even 6 of those 8. But it doesn't start till week 7, and they could be 0-6 by then.
Yeah, and you see a lot of the games that they're playing are, out of conference. You got the Bears, followed by the Packers, followed by the Ravens, followed by the Jaguars, followed by the Seahawks, followed by the Titans, followed by the Lions. So you're not playing anybody in your conference until, I think they're playing on
well, they have Dallas early on. They have Dallas.
Right, but then they don't.
That's a Monday night game.
But then they don't play them again until Thanksgiving. And so basically you're going till Thanksgiving without really playing anybody in your conference. Did you see the big bone of contention with the Giants this year, though?
The Rosh Hashanah game?
Yeah. So they supposedly ask every year to not have either a Sunday night or a Monday night Rosh Hashanah. And this year the league said, hey, it just happened to be that, we want you to play the Cowboys on that night. I don't know. Maybe I just want to ask you a quick opinion. If one team has one request, can you just honor that one request? It's not like every team is asking for that. If they're saying we'll still play Sunday at 1:00, we'll play. They don't even want to play Sunday at 4:00, but just for that 1 week, either put us A, on the road, or B, at 1:00. Is that too hard to ask?
No, I don't think it should be. And listen, I'll admit there's some Giant fan bias coming with this answer, but I will say this, Chris. I always think of the Giants as one of the flagship franchises of the NFL. Wellington Mara was one of the real architects of sharing TV money, right? He could have said back in the 50s, hey, you know what? I'm New York. I'm market number one, and I want more than everybody else. Jerry Jones would have done that if he had been on the scene at the time, and he had been in New York. All right. But Wellington Mara wasn't like that. And so I always feel like when the Giants have a request, because of who they are and what they've meant to this league, that you're right. That's kind of a simple request and should be accommodated. But, it's funny, Chris, when you look at the Jets schedule, they did kind of the same thing. If you look at week 15, 16, 17, you have Lions, Jaguars, and Seahawks at that point. However, the Jets very well could be 5-9 by that point in time. And what difference will it make?
That's the thing is, like, you could sit here and say, oh, the Jets have to play this team on that time, and they don't have any games against people within. Honestly, of the two teams, I really don't expect either one of them to be contending come January 1st. And, you got a couple of games against maybe some teams that you can beat later on, but I think it's going to be really tough. The league always has reasons why they do things. Week 1, we always have to have the Super Bowl champion against maybe the AFC from the previous year or something like that. But I think that, honestly, they're going to flex games out when they need to. And the Giants and the Jets, I think this year it's going to be really, really tough to compete against some of those other teams in their conferences.
Well, that's going to do it for us tonight, folks, from here at Spot On Sports. Our producer-engineer is the great Michael Anthony. Our theme music, Spot On, is by Mr. Scott Daly. Our logo art is by Valerie Hanatic, the Jets fanatic. Our voiceover guy is the amazing Archie Snowden. I want to thank Chris Caiozzo, our new Ranger reporter, for coming on with us. Thank you, Johnny Sticks, for bringing us up to speed on the Barry Trotz situation. Thank you, Chris Caputo, for triple duty, going NBA, Yanks, Mets, NFL, and whatever else. For everybody here at Spot On Sports, this is Mike Trezza saying thank you for watching. We will see you the next time on Spot On Sports.